Bienvenue à KJ et Tony du Manger France.
Welcome to KJ and Tony Move to France. Today we're going to be talking to Adrian Leeds, who is an expert on Americans, North Americans, moving to France, and she knows the market very well, having 29 years of experience doing that.
And she answered some questions for us today, some of our viewers' questions, some of our questions. She basically helps people like us whose dream it is to live in France, and she's a wealth of knowledge, expertise, and wisdom. So we're really grateful that we got to spend an hour and a half with her today and getting to share it with you.
And we hope you enjoy it and learn a lot from Adrian's expertise.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Hi, Adrian. Thank you so much for being here with us today and allowing us to interview you and sharing all of your expertise and your wisdom with our audience. We have received a lot of questions that we're going to be posing to you from our viewers. And before that, though, I think we should probably just start with you telling us about yourself, about your company, and what you do.
Well, KJ and Tony, thank you very much for having me here. It's really a pleasure. I that is one of those questions that will eventually become a memoir that I started working on many years ago. But the short story is that I came on a one-year sabbatical with a husband and a daughter. Left the husband not too much long after. Could not bring myself to leave France. It was just not possible, even though I didn't have the legal right to work, had completely run out of money. And it was probably one of those stupid emotional decisions, but I ended up staying, ended up finding a way of earning a living and surviving, putting one foot in front of the other until here I am, 29 years later with a thriving business and more to do than I know what to do with in 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. And it's been a roller coaster ride, an adventure, and not one that I would have changed for anything else for sure. So I don't know. Yeah. That's kind of a nutshell.
I was interested to see in another interview that you came to Paris with your not then husband, as you describe him, and basically fell in love with the place and didn't want to go on to the rest of your tour of Europe. And that was the beginning of this.
Well, that goes back to 1979 when I just totally fell in love with Paris. And that was the reason that we decided, to come and spend a year here to see what it was like. You've been through that. Right?
We did. That's why it interested me so much, because we did exactly that. How rational is this? We went to Paris for the weekend from Florida and did the same thing, fell in love and decided over that weekend.
Okay, well, ours was a little more than a weekend because over the next, how many years was that? 14 years later, after traveling back and forth and coming to France quite a lot, we finally made that decision. But it was also, you have to have an opportune moment in your life. Mm-hmm. It's not like you can suddenly one day say, okay, I'm going to quit what I'm doing and this other thing. You kind of have to work it into the way your life, the pattern of your life. And at the time when we left, my business, I had an advertising business, and business was not very good. I wasn't making much money, so it didn't seem like much of a point to hang in there. My not yet husband, which became my husband, had retired at that point. And so it really gave us the ability to say, okay, let's go for a year. I will tell you, and you know this probably, that if you're here for any length of time, especially as long as a year, you really can't go back. I mean, I could not go back to living with blinders on. I
Mhm.
couldn't go back to that lifestyle. I couldn't go back to living in a car to get everywhere I wanted to go.
Mhm.
It just wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And also at the time, I had to decide whether I was going to move back to California and put my child in an American school. And that probably was the biggest deciding factor,
Mhm.
because it meant she had to go through metal detectors. It meant that she wasn't going to have the second language, the French. It meant that
Mhm.
if I wanted to give her a good education, I was going to need a whole lot of money that I didn't have because I was
Mhm.
then broke. And so it just wasn't reasonable or logical
Mhm.
to go back. But boy, am I glad I made this decision to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too what I'm hearing you say along with the it has to be in sometimes has to be an opportune moment. I think the other part of that for people that's important for people to understand is that a lot of times it's a process, it like with us. We had that opportune moment, but then based upon certain circumstances, it turned out to not be the right timing. And so I think for some people like ourselves, just, hanging in there in terms of going through a process, because there definitely is when you think about the visa process and, the things that you have to do to make this dream a reality. And that's a big part of what you do is that you help people
Well, that's
make
it.
their
That,
dream a reality.
and I hear it every day. I mean, I hear everybody's stories every single day, and and what they need to do to get the right direction and make it simpler. The
Hmm.
funny thing is that when we moved over here, I didn't do any of that. My ex-husband, who was retired, did all of it. So I
Yeah.
didn't have a clue about any
Hmm.
of it.
Yeah.
And he was also a property developer. He built houses, which I was not
Hmm.
involved in. I didn't know anything about real estate either. So
Yeah.
so I've gone 180. It's
Wow.
just, yeah, it's funny how
So
life.
interesting.
Mhm.
So, people think of you as a real estate person, whether it's renting or buying, but I know that you do a whole lot more than that. So, can you just tell our viewers a little bit about what your company does and what, you know, I've heard it said as soup to nuts or different variations of
Yeah.
that term, but it seems to be much more than what a real estate broker in the United States would do.
Well, we are licensed agents, but we don't think of ourselves as real estate agents because we do represent some properties for sale, but we really are more consultants. So our clients come to us to help them find a property to either rent or purchase. And so everything related to that, we do everything beginning to end. But most of our clients come at the very beginning of their idea to possibly move to France or invest in France. And so they're not really ready to make that leap yet. They just need to know what to expect, how to go about doing it, if it's something
Mhm.
they can do, just to kind of make them feel more comfortable with that path. And so I think of myself more as a strategist and a psychologist than
Yeah.
anything else,
Mhm.
because it can be very frightening for people to make such an
Mhm.
enormous change. And,
Well,
they need sort of insurance and backup and feeling confident that they can do it.
Well, we've seen you on House Hunters International so many times, and the
Mhm.
personalities that you encounter are sometimes pretty unique, and you have to be able to
Yeah.
massage the situation so that you find the right place for them. And I'm sure that many times you're sitting there thinking, "This is not the right place for you," but that's what they want.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Tony, because I'm not a I'll do anything you want me to do person. Okay, so if you think you know everything there is to know, then don't even come to me, forget it. Because no, seriously,
Yeah.
because very, very, very often I get a client thinking in a 180-degree turn from what they were thinking. I call it the Peter Mayle syndrome, and that's because they have this romantic idea of living in some little, stone house in a little village or in the countryside, and they've forgotten what the reality of that is. They don't know, maybe, and so I have to say, look, here's what you're about to do to yourself. Not sure that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Let's really think about it. And I very, very often change their minds.
Yeah, you do. We've seen that in the episodes. How
The episodes are TV, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
That's not quite the same thing as the reality.
Right.
Because with House Hunters, like any reality show, they can't actually film in real time. And maybe I'm bursting everyone's bubble, but no reality show is real. Okay. It just can't be. You can't film in real time. You have to get too many location releases, talent releases, permissions, all those things. And so we have to kind of recreate what they went through. And it's not scripted. We show up, and we say whatever we say based on the reality of that moment. And so it's not scripted, but it's also not really exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, at the producers, they interview these people. They do videotapes. They have to get approval, so they're not going to show anybody on camera that's boring. Let's face it.
Right.
They want people who are interested. And not all of them are my clients to begin with. Some of them are just people that they want to film, and then they bring me in. And there are times where I come in and I don't know these people at all. And I have to get to know them, and they're nervous about being on camera.
Sure.
And so, the point is to make everybody feel comfortable and just to have fun, which we always.
Yeah.
Sure.
It looks
and
fun.
that comes through to the viewer that you're having fun. Because you always are ebullient and have a smile on your face, and so I think that tells everybody to relax and have fun. So
it's kind of like after we get started a little bit, and I've seen these couples, they're just kind of sitting there stiff, and they're looking at the camera and they're concerned about what they look like and all that stuff. So I just go, look, it's all going to be fine. Just chill out, follow my lead, and I make them laugh, and then within a few minutes, it's okay.
Right. Yeah.
So let's say somebody comes to you and they have fallen in love with Paris through various vacations, and they say to you, Adrian, I want to move to Paris, and I want to do it right. What does right look like, and how long does that take approximately?
Doing it right. Okay, so doing it right, first of all, Paris is expensive, so you really have to have enough budget. If you tell me you've got $300,000 or euros to spend and you want a 2-bedroom apartment, I'm going to say dream on. That's not happening. Okay, not in Paris anyway. So being realistic about what you can afford to do is probably key. How long it takes could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months, because the process is just a long and arduous task, and it's highly administrative. But what's good about that, in spite of the bureaucracy in France, which is overwhelming, it's basically non-risk. They dot their I's and cross their T's, and you get good documentation. And so let's put it this way, not sure I would buy property in Italy, okay, but France, sure thing. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's kind of the type of thing that our viewers want to hear about. So, Kay, you have some questions from our viewers.
I have quite a few viewer questions. So I'm just going to start at the top, which the first one says, what are the top considerations for people moving to France that might not be intuitive to Americans or Canadians? And this question is from our viewer, Izzy Paris.
Wow, the top considerations for moving to France. I think, and you probably, you might agree with me. I think the single most difficult thing to do is the cultural crossing. That's the number one hardest thing. Everything else is just mechanical, or administrative. but fully understanding the French, why they are who they are, and how to deal with that. I'm still doing that after 29 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So language is a part of it because that's difficult, but the cultural crossing is harder. And a lot of people who have read my newsletters or seen other videos probably have heard me say this. English law, which is what the US and Canada, well, I don't know about Canada, but on the US is based on English law. Okay. Napoleonic Code is in France. English law is based on what's forbidden. Napoleonic Code is based on what's allowed. What that means is they are diametrically opposed, and your viewpoint is completely different. So when the law says it's based on what's forbidden, you can't steal, you can't kill, you can't do this, you can't do that, but everything else is possible. So it's a very kind of open-minded way of looking at law and an out-of-the-box idea. Whereas in France, you have to follow the rules. It's based on what's allowed. And so the rules are written, and rules are written on top of other rules. And somehow you have to kind of figure out how to follow those rules, and everything outside of that is forbidden. You see? So when you're trying to follow these rules, I equate it to being put in a straitjacket and then being asked to perform somersaults. And so the French have the same problem we have with it. And they have what they call system D, which means being débrouillard, or untangling or unfogging the situation. And the ones who are really bold about it will actually say, so we just cheat a little. Okay, because otherwise they can't really live within that. And it's also in the box thinking, and they're taught to think inside of the box. So you take these two individuals, right? A North American who's like used to thinking outside of the box and anything goes, to the French who are just following their rules, and it makes no sense to us whatsoever. So that to me is the single hardest thing to overcome.
We actually saw a bit of that when we applied for our visa, because we made an appointment to go do our visa, and we weren't aware that we needed two separate appointments. We thought we only needed one appointment for the two of us. When we got there, we had driven an hour and a half to get there. Only KJ could go in, and they wouldn't even let me in the office. And I ended up down in the lobby thinking to myself, well, KJ will sweet talk her way through this. Well, she actually did. She did. And it wasn't so much sweet talking as just not getting upset, not being aggressive, right? Okay, go ahead.
Right. No, I was just going to say, but they were very, very adamant about like it had to be this way, even though it didn't, in our minds, it was like, but that doesn't make sense. We're going together. It didn't ask for separate appointment, like it wasn't understood that way. And they were just not,
Well, you hit the nail on the head, okay, because it's called not logical.
Right. Not logical.
We think in logical ways.
Right.
Okay? They cannot think in logical ways because it's usually contrary to the rule.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I just think that if you kind of put that hat on when you glide through France all the time, oh yeah, there's Napoleonic Code we're dealing with.
Yes.
You can kind of get through it better.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, that applies to the language as well. The language, it just doesn't seem to make sense, and it's backwards sometimes. So, it is, you have to think like back, like, opposite, or I don't know how to just, opposite.
But just anyway, that's the rest is easy.
Yeah. Okay. So the cultural, that's not going to be intuitive necessarily when you move to France, is that there's definitely this huge cultural adjustment relative to mindset and the way that we're looking at the world through two totally different lenses, basically.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. The next question is regarding the long stay visa. Once you have your appointment with the prefecture, are you allowed multiple exits and entries to France? And this is from Art Brut, New York. So I think what I understand him saying is
Can you leave
once
the country once you have your visa?
like can you leave and come back multiple times? I see
Okay,
why
so
not.
I am not an immigration expert.
Hmm.
Okay, let's start with that because we work with people who are.
Yeah.
However, you have to understand what a visa is. The visa just enables you, okay, to legally reside in France more than 90 days. It's
Hmm.
about residence. It's not about going in and out. You can
Hmm.
go in and out as much as you want.
Hmm.
Has nothing to do with, you
Right.
have to compartmentalize all these pieces. Okay.
Right.
So think of them as different rooms in a house, right?
Hmm.
The visa, which has only about immigration, has nothing to do with taxation,
Hmm.
right? Because
Right.
taxation has to do with the residency rule, which is 183 days or more, makes you tax resident, which,
Hmm.
and you could be tax resident, but not necessarily have a visa. Believe it or
Ah.
not.
Hmm.
Okay. Because without a visa, you can be in the country, no more than 90 days
Right.
within a 180-day period,
Hmm.
right? But what if you do that a lot? And what if you
Hmm.
do end up spending 6 months? And what if your primary life is in France? You could easily be tax resident, but still not have a visa.
Ah. Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I think even though to some people this may seem like a very basic understanding that that would be the case in terms of being able to come in and out, I think for a lot of people who are not especially used to doing a lot of travel, that this isn't as clear, like
Oh
that
no,
would
it's a new
be
world. It's a
the
new world.
case.
It's like
Yeah.
currency.
Right.
When you're an American living in dollars, you don't even know there is other currencies. I mean,
Right.
come on. Okay, you don't have
Yeah.
any experience
Yeah.
dealing with currency exchange, for example.
Right.
And that becomes another whole new world to you that
Yeah.
opens up.
Right.
These are some of the reasons why it's impossible to go back, because this
Hmm.
whole world is being opened up to you. And then you
Right.
start to realize that, oh my God, I used to live with blinders on. I
Right.
didn't know this existed outside of,
Yeah.
right, the
Right.
US.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
yeah. And so that's why it's just, you're about to blow the lid off the
Yeah.
whole story. Yeah.
Yeah. Really expands your, um,
Your world, your life.
yeah, absolutely. Tony, why don't you ask a couple of our questions that we have on our list, and then we'll go back to because I have like five more. So why don't we go
Yeah.
back and forth a little bit?
One of the things that I think about is not only why Americans are interested in moving to France, but also why when you tell an American we're moving to France, they have a visceral reaction. There's no middle of the road.
Mhm.
It's either, oh my God, I wish I was doing that, or
Mhm.
what are you crazy? Why would you
Yeah.
do that? Why would you go there? And
Exactly.
and so why do you think that is?
Well, there's definitely a group of Americans out there, a huge number, in fact, almost everyone, who wouldn't ever dream of leaving their home country. Just
Hmm.
wouldn't
Hmm.
conceive of it in any
Yeah.
way, shape, or form, and who have also been drinking the American Kool-Aid for a long
Hmm.
time, thinking that it's the greatest place on the planet and there's nothing like it and nothing could be better, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were all indoctrinated, right, to
Hmm.
believe that this was the greatest country period ever that you could exist in.
Hmm.
And so that, you don't want to upset their little secure world, because that's what
Hmm.
happens. They feel threatened.
Hmm.
Okay, when you say I'm moving to France, then they're like, those people are suddenly threatened by it.
Yeah.
Then there's the other group of people who are well traveled and have discovered, okay, some of the benefits of living or just spending time outside of the US or Canada. And so they just think, oh my God, that's our dream. We wish we could do that. We've been
Hmm.
thinking about it for a long time. So
Yeah.
it's why you get these two camps.
Hmm.
Um, I can remember when we moved over, some of our friends couldn't conceive of why we would sell our house, sell our cars, and go into this completely unknown situation. And how could we afford to do that? Give up our jobs.
Hmm.
And I just said, you sell that Mercedes and you can live in France for a few years. Okay. I mean, there's,
So true.
you just realize that there
Yeah.
are creature comforts that we admire in the United States because wealth is, that's what we all aspire to be, right? Is wealthy and have all a big house and fabulous cars and all those things.
Yeah.
Then when you spend time here, you realize that has no meaning whatsoever to a happy life. That all those things, that's all they are, is ego building, possessions that keep telling you, oh, you're great, you made it, you were successful. But that's the other side of the coin, you see, that you get to see over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we experienced what you've just described from A to Z, the entire thing. People saying to us, you're getting rid of everything? What if it doesn't work out?
Right.
Well, that's part of getting rid of everything. We're going to make it work out, And
what if it didn't work out? What would happen?
Right.
Well, we experienced that too, right? Because we had a blip, and yes, we got rid of 4 cars when we left, and we came back to no cars, so we got cars again.
And I can't wait to get rid of them again.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get rid of them.
I haven't owned a car in 29 years, and I can tell you that it was like fabulous.
It's such freedom. It's such a sense of freedom, at least for me. Everyone is different, but for me, it was such a sense of freedom not to, like you said, be living your life inside a car practically. So
yeah, but you can't have that freedom in the US except for New York.
Right.
It just
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas in France, because the public transportation is so good, that you can exist almost everywhere except for the countryside. Except for the countryside. You can exist in any French town without a car.
Exactly. Yeah.
We were recently in Nice for 2 weeks, and I had been there for a month in February, and their rapid transit system there is so good that you don't.
Amazing, right?
It's comfortable, it's clean, it's on time, it's frequent. You can get everywhere on.
What's happened in the United States is really a shame, okay? Because the automobile industry and others really put a kibosh on public transportation. So the people who take public transportation in the United States are mostly the people who can't afford to have a car, which makes it less desirable. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? So the public transportation sucks, number one. And then on top of it, the other people that are on public transportation are maybe that's not your comfort zone. I don't know. Okay. But that's not true in France or anywhere in Europe, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It's not the way it is here
at
all. Everybody's on public transportation. Wow.
And if they're not, they just have they're on public transportation, but I think that it's more common for people to have like scooters than it is for them to have
scooters or motorbikes.
Or motorbikes,
I flew back from Corsica on Saturday, and arrived. The Nice airport is just fabulously easy, and you walk out. You don't go through lots of long halls. The luggage was already kind of there waiting. You walk out the door, and literally in front of the door of the airport is the tram. You get on the tram. The tram takes me to 2 blocks away from my apartment. I roll my suitcase home, and I'm literally home in 30 minutes. I mean, that's it. Done.
Yeah, it's great.
When we were in Nice 2 months ago now, on a Sunday, I actually took the tram to the airport to get food because I wanted KJ to experience it, and got back on the tram and took it home to her. Who does that? Who goes to the airport?
just to get this particular food that was near the airport.
That's really funny. But that's just an example of how easy it is to get around.
Sure.
It is super easy.
And inexpensive.
Oh, well, a ticket's like, less than €2.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I almost got arrested. No, because I ran out of my thing ran out, my card ran out, and I got on the train, and Tony I don't know how it happened because Tony had one more left, but mine was empty for I don't know what happened. And they came on the train. They,
You
like, what do you call them?
control, you got control controllers.
And then, they took the card, and then there's this whole process of you need to come with us when we get off at the next stop. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do?
Well, they fined you, right? You just paid a
Yeah,
fine.
we just paid money.
Yeah,
Doesn't it
it's just
sound a lot better? Doesn't it sound a lot better to say I had to bail her out of jail or anything like
That's what he tells people. I had to bail her out of jail.
it's a
Anyway,
better
let's
better
move on
deal.
to the next
that?
question.
Okay.
So we've touched on how expensive Paris is, and everybody knows Paris is expensive. But are there any pleasant surprises about costs? Are there things that
That's a really
people are
good
gonna,
question.
yeah,
That's a really good question because Paris is only expensive from a property standpoint.
okay.
I believe that you can live here in France for half of what it costs you to live in the United States. And that is because of major expenses, which are clearly decidedly different. If you own property, for example, the property taxes are about 1/10 of what they are in the United States. 1/10.
Wow.
Um, it's quite amazing. I mean, the property taxes on my Paris apartment are 627 euros a year. I mean, come
Wow.
on, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have kids, the public educational system is excellent. You don't need to spend money to educate your kids.
Hmm.
Even, and that's even through college, through university,
Hmm.
pretty much free with the exception of some expenses. So, that's a big expense. Insurance
Hmm.
costs, medical costs. Medical costs are about 1/10 in France of what they
Hmm.
are in the United States. Therefore, the medical insurance is a lot less expensive. And if you're on the the French healthcare system, then you're only having to cover like 30% of the costs on top of that, because they'll cover up to 70% of your costs. So we find that overall, especially for retirees, this makes their, retirement, their pension, their social security stretch double.
Mhm.
Imagine that. And if they're
Yeah.
not having to own and operate a car, which AAA will tell you costs on the average close to $11,000 a year,
Hmm.
you can travel all over Europe and have a great time, okay, for
Yeah.
that $11,000 that you've just saved on the car.
Right.
So literally, it's a fantastic place to retire to.
Yeah.
And the French do not tax your retirement income. They only tax your revenue income.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's a huge benefit, huge benefit.
Okay, you have questions from the
Yeah,
viewers?
sure. Okay. So the next question, what sort of neighborhood choices, locale to choose from, where rentals are moderately priced, at what rates? These questions pop up thinking of Nice and nearby areas. What other places would you recommend in south of France? So I think they're just wondering, I guess, the best and most economical, like for your money, it sounds like.
I have done quite a lot of webinars and newsletters about how to decide where to live in
Hmm.
France.
Hmm.
Deciding how to decide where to live in France, I think there are certain key elements that make all the difference. First off, I think access to transportation is really key, because
Hmm.
if you want to travel, you're now in the center of Europe, right? You're in
Hmm.
the middle of Europe. You have the ability to travel everywhere. But if you're too remote, if you're not near an international airport or a good train hub, then you're not going to be able to do that very well. So I think that transportation is a big issue when it comes to deciding where to live. Weather, of course, what kind of climate do you want to be in should be considered, right? Because the north of France tends to be cooler, rainier, and maybe that's your thing, or maybe you prefer to be, in a warm, sunny climate, right?
Hmm.
Nice happens to have the best climate in France in terms of the sunniest, the most moderate, not the hottest,
Right.
not the coldest, right? No,
Hmm.
Nice is generally the overall best weather. But one of the other things I personally think is really important is having a good American community. I think it's really important to have the support of an American community where you can make a lot of friends, meet interesting people, people who can help you commiserate with the issues you're going through,
Yeah.
a support system, and give you lots of things to do, because
Mhm.
penetrating the French community is near to impossible.
Mhm.
Fluent in French that would help the situation.
Mhm.
But again, you've got the cultural aspect to overcome. And the French who have, lived here their whole lives, they have their family, they have their friends, they're not really interested in us.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't care about us at all. They're
Yeah.
not open to meeting foreigners necessarily.
Yeah.
So I think that those are really important things to consider.
Mhm.
And they should be sort of at the top of the list. I do have
Mhm.
some favorite cities, though. I think that living in the countryside is great if you want to be really secluded and go away and do nothing and not go anywhere.
Right.
Okay. And spend all your time working on your house.
Mhm.
If that's
Yeah.
what you want to do, that's what you're going to be doing. Kind of Peter Mayle-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. Just like that. In fact, I was with a couple for dinner over the weekend that used to have this big, fabulous house in Provence. And they, after years of going there and spending all their time working on the house, they realized that was not really what they wanted to do in their later years. So they gave it up. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and now I've lost my thread, my train.
So
My
what are some of your favorite
my
places?
favorite cities? My favorite cities.
Favorite cities?
Well, Paris is still number one.
Mhm.
Paris is Paris. Paris is the cultural mecca of the planet.
Mhm.
It's the center of Europe. You can get to anywhere from Paris by train or plane or
Mhm.
otherwise. And I think Paris is number one, but Paris is expensive for purchase, not expensive for rental.
Mhm.
Paris has rent control, and the rents are actually really reasonable. Believe it or not, shockingly so, about half of what they are in New York, for example. So the price of property in Manhattan is about the same as Paris, but the rents are about half.
Mm.
So I think Paris is one. Two is Nice. And not outside of Nice. Nice,
Mhm.
central Nice,
Mhm.
in the middle.
Mhm.
And that's because the transportation system's great. It's an international airport. You can get anywhere from Nice. The weather's fabulous. It's gorgeous. I mean, come on, it's the
Yeah.
Riviera. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. And there's a
So many
huge American
places
community.
close,
I'm sorry,
right?
what?
There's so many places close to Nice that you
Mhm.
want to go to too.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, like they're all the entire Riviera, close to
yeah,
Provence, close to Italy,
Mhm.
close to
Mhm.
Corsica,
yeah.
all that stuff. But the access to all of that is quite wonderful. And it really is drop dead beautiful. I mean, there is a reason
It
that the Riviera
is.
is the land of the rich and famous.
Mhm.
And it's also quite cultural. So you're not really missing out on that much. It's not
Mhm.
Paris. Nothing is Paris, not even London or New York, okay, is
Yeah.
Paris. But at least you've got plenty to do, and it's very relaxing, and the weather's great. And property wise, to purchase property is about half of what Paris is,
Mhm.
and to rent is about 2/3 to 3/4 of what Paris is.
Mm.
So
Thanks.
that's my second choice.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed and I say over and over and over again is describing the Mediterranean and the color of the water
Mhm.
there is not it's almost indescribable. You have to experience it. And
It
I
is.
remember trying to describe it to KJ because I was there before her. And it's a shade of blue that you don't see anywhere else in the world.
Well, but we saw it because I remember this is how impactful it was to me. I distinctly remember the very first time I saw the Mediterranean, which was the first time we went to the south of France with my parents over 10 years ago. And we were going on a cruise and we flew into, did we fly into Nice?
No, we flew into Rome. Oh no,
We,
you're right. We flew into
no,
Nice
we,
and went to Monaco.
and went to Monaco and picked up the ship in Monaco. And that's the first time I saw the Mediterranean. And I remember just being blown away by just how incredibly blue and beautiful the
Yeah, but
water is.
The color, I was just in, the Mediterranean is one thing, but the color in Nice is different than the Mediterranean.
Oh, it is?
I was just, oh yeah, it's different. Nice is specific. I was just in Corsica and the beaches are drop dead gorgeous, but
Mm.
my friends and I all decided that the color was decidedly different, was a little bit greener. The reason for
Hmm.
that is because, you know, the color is affected by the earth underneath the sea, right? Like
Mhm, mhm.
what it's made of, the
Right,
sky, right? What's happening in the sky, as
right.
well as the amount of minerals that are in the water.
Hmm.
So yesterday I was floating away, okay, on the Bay des Anges with my noodle and looking at that water and going, definitely different, not the same color at
Mhm,
all. It's kind of a bluer blue, but
mhm,
it's still that it's a gorgeous aqua and it changes constantly.
mhm,
I mean, you just
mhm,
always see it changing. And it is decidedly different in Nice. Even if you go to Menton or you go to Cannes, it's different,
mhm,
not
Yeah.
the same color.
So we
mm.
walked up the mountain, up the castle, right? And did a video about that. And you could see as you walked up to the different stages, the different shades of blue, as you could see further out into the Mediterranean, how it is even different in
Right.
one picture.
Oh,
Mhm.
it changes all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, I was on the beach for a few hours yesterday, and while I'm on the beach, it's changing.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
just, and it's, when you're in it, it's like milk. It's
Yeah.
it's like this translucent,
It is.
because it's not, it's just milky. It's so
Mhm.
gorgeous. Oh my
It
God.
is. It is.
Yeah, yeah.
It
And
makes it so hard to decide between Paris and Nice because that water is just
you have to
spectacular.
have both. You have to have both.
Yeah, of
I
course.
think you're
But in
right about
terms of
that.
like committing to living for a year because we really want to commit for either or, like for an entire year. And of course we could do a year in Paris and then a year in Nice and then, go from there. But rather than moving around, I think because of our previous experience that we've had, committing to like staying in one place for 1 year in terms of living there. Of course, we can travel and go, wherever, but committing to that full year of a lease somewhere is, I
Well, I
think,
have a
important.
team, okay, that works on paper, um, where you invest in a property in Nice, which is half
Hmm.
the price of Paris,
Hmm.
and rent it. But not all the time. You use it when you want. You rent it the rest of the time, and you take the profits from the rents, and you rent an apartment in Paris, which is not expensive, full time
Ah,
on a
ah,
1 year lease, and that way you can have both cities.
Wow.
It works.
yeah,
Yeah.
Can work.
But
interesting.
we'll have to talk about that more.
Yes, we will.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
One thing I completely agree with you about is you said a minute ago, Paris is Paris. There's nothing like Paris,
Mhm.
not London, not New York, not anywhere else in the world. And it's just a spectacular place. Or when we were in Versailles and we would come into Paris and we take the subway into the Saint-Germain, and I'm probably saying that wrong, area, we come up out of the subway, I feel like I was home. I feel like, okay, I'm home now. I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to enjoy. I know what restaurants to go to, what bakeries to go to, or whatever it is that I shop, whatever. So I love Paris.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, there's only a few things to not love about Paris. Okay. The weather,
Mhm.
Mhm.
okay, which that's my saying,
Yeah,
in Paris, you don't come here for the weather, right?
right.
And most people who read my stuff know that I'm not very fond of the current mayor. I think she's done a really terrible job of keeping the city in good shape. And it's been very upsetting to me, actually. The city
Mm.
is, unfortunately, city's dirtier. There's a hell of a lot more graffiti. The construction and the rush to get the bike and scooter lanes in place and to get ready for the Olympics and all that stuff has just torn the city up. Uh, and it needs to calm down. It needs to get back into good condition. And
Mhm.
I don't think she's the person who can do it. Now, on the other side of the coin, Nice has a mayor that is insanely fantastic and has made incredible improvements to the city. He's really brought a community together, and it shows. It shows.
Mhm.
So, unfortunately, sometimes politics gets in the way of a town's
Sure.
good aspects. But
Mhm.
yeah. Anyway,
So
okay, that's
Okay.
my
mentioned
rant.
you just mentioned the Olympics, and that's the first time it's come up. And what do you see the Olympics doing to rents?
Well, only for the time that it's going to take place. After
Mhm.
that, I think everything will go back to normal. It's really
Okay.
only that summer period where it's going to mean anything,
Mhm.
I think. I intend to be gone for the Olympics. I really don't have any
Yeah.
interest in that mess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But other people are clamoring to do whatever they can to
To
participate.
be here, to be there.
Yeah, but it's just not my thing.
It's pouring out right now here.
Yeah,
You see
not
it. You
here.
probably
It's
can't hear
very far.
it.
It's not.
So we've noticed and we've read about and then experienced the fact that people in France dress differently than we do in the United States. For example, you see men in ties more often. You see women dressed better. You don't see as much revealing clothing, and that it just seems like it's more, although you hear all these things about the passion of France and things like that, the way people dress seems a little more conservative and more purposeful, um, more like they're dressing a certain way for a certain reason. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Well, for one thing, in Paris, there's a certain respect that everyone has for the city.
Mm-hmm.
So they dress because of their respect for the city itself. The French are not walking out in their jogging clothes. Okay.
Right.
They're not just going to run to the store and run home again and not care what they look like. They're not leaving the
Mhm.
house until they look proper.
Mhm.
Sure.
Women certainly wear a lot more dresses. When I'm in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mhm.
States, my sisters, when I put on a dress, and my sisters will say, "Where are you going all dressed up?" And I'm going, "What do you mean dressed up? I'm just wearing a skirt, you know."
Yeah.
And so women wear dresses more often because that's what men want to see them in. And
Mhm.
there's still that, idea of attractiveness
Mhm.
Sure.
that happens. They're not at war with one another like they are in the States, exactly.
Mhm.
But the French don't have a lot of money. You have to remember that, they can't afford to just run out and buy all sorts of things. So they buy good clothing that's going to last them a long time, and it tends to be more classic. They're they don't have a lot of space to
Mhm.
house a lot of things. They
Right.
don't want to own all that in general.
Mhm.
It's just, so they're more conservative on all those issues. But they
Mhm.
do dress differently in Paris than they do in Nice. Two
Sure.
worlds.
Sure.
Mm.
Sure. I liken the way people dress in Paris to the way people dressed in the 50s in the United States. If you looked at a sporting event in the 50s in the United States, men had suits on, they had hats on, they had ties on. It's just completely different. The
Well,
dress,
it's just more important.
yeah.
It's just more important.
My kind of place. I like
Yeah.
dresses. Definitely
Yeah.
my kind of
Yeah,
city.
you can certainly tell the tourists from the French.
Hmm. Yeah.
I can remember though, I've watched it all these years. I mean, I can remember when the only people in sneakers were the tourists.
Tourists. Yeah.
It's not true anymore. And I
Mm.
can remember when you never saw French men's legs because they would never wear shorts out on the street, even in the height of summer. That's not true anymore.
Hmm.
Oh, it's definitely, it's changed.
It's
It's
changed.
changed a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, you have
And
another viewer question?
I do. Okay, so let me see here. This one is from Debbie in Kansas, and she asks, I was wondering what it would be like to live in Ken. Would air conditioning be more prevalent? Are all parts of Ken ultra expensive? I don't know if you're familiar with Ken.
I am definitely familiar with Cannes, and it's just down the road a piece. It's funny about Cannes because I think of Cannes like I think of Hollywood. It's not
Mhm.
real. I mean,
Mm,
it comes alive when there are events happening in Cannes.
mhm,
Otherwise, it's just a small town
mhm,
along the Riviera. And so it has this kind of chic, it's that image, right, that people
mhm.
think of as it being glamorous and all of that. And it can be certainly glamorous. You can certainly feel that way, but I don't think it's a very interesting place to be.
Mm,
It's really just a lot of big exhibition halls is what it is. Kind
right.
of Hollywood is really just a big bunch of big barns where they film things, right?
Right.
Kind of the same idea.
Well, it kind
Uh,
of reminds me of a little bit. I mean, maybe not exactly the same, but the idea that people think of when they think of Los Angeles, LA, like I'm gonna go visit LA, and then you find out that Los Angeles isn't really like a glitzy, glamorous type
no,
of
it's like
town. It's the
it's just a
complete
big
opposite
like
of
that.
that. Yeah.
The thing about Cannes, which is the least, actually the most uninteresting part of it, is the fact that it's 30 minutes down the road from Nice. And
Mhm.
anything you want to do, you've got to travel from Cannes to get to the airport to do certain things.
Right.
So it's not as convenient as being in central Nice. And you
Right.
wouldn't, there's nothing going on there other than
Hmm.
if you're at the film festival, fine. If you're
Hmm.
participating in that or
Hmm.
any of the other events, fine. But if not, then you're going to be traveling to Nice for everything.
We were at the and right after the film festival, and it was teeming with people. It was swarming. It was
Hmm.
what you would expect if you had never been there before. But I was there in February, and there was nobody on the streets. There was,
Exactly.
no
Hmm.
tourists. Many restaurants were closed. There seemed like nothing to do there. It was
That's
just,
right.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would think outside of the film festival, when the film festival is there, the rents and the even the prices for purchasing would be less than because it's not as accessible. I mean, I think like any south of France town, you're going to have your prime real estate by the water and things like that. But in general, because this is part of her question, I think the natural assumption is to live in Cannes, I'm saying right, is
It
is
actually took me a long
super
time to learn how to
expensive.
pronounce it.
Yeah,
It's neat.
it's
It's not
tricky.
Can and it's not Con. It's in between the two.
Hmm.
So if it's like Can, it's like
Can,
somewhere in between Can
yeah. Hmm. Right.
and Can. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's particularly ultra expensive in comparison to other south of France towns, but I could be wrong.
Not as expensive as Cap Ferrat, for
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
Probably on a par with Villefranche-sur-Mer.
Hmm.
And now some parts of Nice is exploding, and property is going up in value like insane, and there's very little property on the market. My where I bought 11 12 years ago now is now double the price per square meter
Hmm.
from when I bought it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really exploded.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think because of the mayor and all the wonderful
Yeah.
improvements that he made to this
Yeah.
town. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, just a couple more questions. Can you please ask Adrian how it works in terms of buying a residential property in France if you are a dual citizen? Are there additional taxes or perhaps benefits being also considered a French national?
Nothing.
No,
There's nothing
no,
different. Anyone can buy property in France. Your nationality has nothing
does
to do.
not matter. Okay.
Nope.
And then the last question, or actually, I think I have one more on my phone here that came up overnight. I'm looking to make a move to Nice in January 2025. My question is, can I get a visa using a 1 to 2 month rental address so I can actually see a longer term flat before signing a 1 to 3 year lease? And
Okay,
she
I
says, yeah,
know the question well because it's a catch-22.
yeah,
In order to apply for a visa, you have to have an address that you're going to be living
right.
at.
Hmm.
Okay, but you can't have an address until you have the visa.
I know.
So it's a cockamamie situation.
Right.
Our clients who come to us, we provide this information. We provide an address.
Hmm.
So so I have hundreds of people now living with me, but it works. And we're of the mind that whatever works. The point
Right.
is you get the appointment. The
Right.
point is you get the visa, and as long
Hmm.
as you get that, it doesn't matter,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so as long as I attest to it, nobody argues with it.
Yeah. I figured it might be something like that in working with you, that's one of the advantages is that you don't have to go through that. Well, let me rent a place for a couple of months so I have an address, because that's what we ran into, which we weren't prepared for at all in planning the moving around was this, oh my gosh, we have to make this appointment and we're not even going to be in Paris at the time that we
Yes.
actually
I
get the
mean,
appointment.
hey, I get it. Okay. They want to know that they're not allowing just a refugee to come in that has no place to live and is going to end up on the street.
Right.
Right. I mean, they're not
Right.
going to give a visa if you have no place to live.
Right.
But it's tough. I mean,
Yeah.
because coming from the outside, like you're not ready to do that. You want your visa before you get your apartment,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
we facilitate it. Yeah.
That's great. That's the
So
last of the viewer questions, Tony.
we've touched on a lot of things, but one thing we haven't touched on that I think is very important is learning French. And what's your recommendation for people who don't know any French at all, but love what they think they know about the culture and the history of France or Paris or Nice or all of that? What do you think about learning the language?
I think that no one should do what I did, which was nothing. Okay, so when we moved here, I had it in my mind that I was going to do intensive courses and, of course, be fluent in 3 months. Okay,
Mhm.
then I land in Paris and I realized I don't want to spend all my time in French classes. I want to experience the city. And I'm
Mhm.
not a good classroom person. I'm too autodidactic. I don't feel comfortable in a classroom. So I ended up starting my own French English conversation group that I ran with a partner for 20 years. And that's how I learned French, was through just conversation, which
Oh.
is dumb, okay? Because it didn't give me the foundation to read or write. But it was a way for me to I 3 times a week. It was a way to earn
Mhm.
money. I needed to earn money. And it certainly was a way to at least learn conversational French. I think it's really a good idea to learn as much French as you can before you come. You're not going to get the practice until you come, but at least you get the foundation. And, there are 117 Alliances Françaises across the United States. And you can do their courses in person or online. And I think that's a great way to start.
Mhm.
Now, there are lots of other language schools, and there's lots of online ways of learning
Yeah.
courses. And I have friends who have courses, that you
Mhm.
can buy into, and lots of things.
Mhm.
But it doesn't matter. Do whatever you feel
Yeah.
comfortable, but do something. Now,
Yeah.
the thing is that you don't really need a lot of French. You probably know
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
If you're in Nice or Paris, you can exist with English. You really don't
Mhm.
need French anymore.
Right.
Sure.
But you'll never fully integrate without it.
Right. Yeah.
That's for sure. And you're
Yeah.
going to have a whole lot more fun if your
Right.
French is at least
Exactly. Yeah.
a certain level.
Mhm. Yeah, and we're currently using Lingoda, which we just started a few weeks ago or about a month ago, and Tony, you just started. You had your first class this past week, but I've had about four or five now, and it's much better than any. Let's just say it's much better than any other that we've used in the past. But we've also heard great things from there was one of our viewers that we met, Paul, who I think you know, who we met while we were in Nice, and he uses the Allianz, I believe, right, Tony? Isn't that
Yes, I think
correct?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And he's still taking classes 5 years in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So,
hey, 29 years of my French sucks. Okay. In spite of, speaking it daily.
Mm,
So at least I passed the French test for my
right.
citizenship.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that was a big deal.
So congratulations, and it can't be that bad if you passed.
If I passed, right,
If you
well,
passed your test.
well, I tell you what, I worked with a tutor who
Mhm.
who didn't teach me French. What he taught me was how to take the test.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the best. Oh my God. I am sure that's why I aced it.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
you've mentioned 29 years and how long you've been there several times. You know, we go on Google and other things and check out. We've been to a lot of the great places in Paris that are well known. And if everybody's top eight in different order is probably the same top eight, what are places in Paris that people don't really know about that they shouldn't miss?
Like what kind of places? You got to
Like,
narrow this down to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
like for me,
Museums, restaurants,
any of those, but for me, the monuments. I thought Notre Dame the first time I saw it was it was okay, nothing special. And then we moved a block and a half from it, and I was there every night. I was there every single night.
okay.
And I think it's the most spectacular place perhaps in Paris. It was my ignorance that that kind of formed my opinion to begin with. And so that's why I'm trying to get our viewers to see things that aren't obvious, that you know about from being there 29 years, and whether it's a church somewhere or a cemetery somewhere, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That. Yeah, go ahead,
Or
Kay.
a museum or a restaurant
Right,
or,
right, yeah.
just like a hidden gem, just maybe a couple of hidden gems.
God, that is tough.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's hard. It's
I
subjective too, really. It's very subjective, right? Like what you
so weird. I
consider.
apologize, but I have a phone that's turned off that's getting a call in. I don't know. But anyway, we're gonna ignore that. Hidden gems. I mean, there's it takes a lifetime to get to know Paris.
Hmm.
Okay. Honestly. Someone once said to me, I'm coming to Paris for 2 days. What should I do? And I said, don't come. I mean, you can't do Paris in 2 days. You need a lifetime to really discover it.
Yeah.
And there are zillions of fabulous little parks that are certainly not on the radar. There's more museums in Paris than probably any other city in the world. So there's a lot of really interesting little museums rather than going to the top 10, for example. Like La Vie Romantique, for example. There are things like that are, mineral museum, things that are just really, really interesting. Restaurants, of course, because, if the New York Times has written it up, avoid it. Then, it's just filled with Americans. Forget that. In order to find the little mama papa places, you have to dig a little bit deeper.
Explore.
Yeah,
You have to explore.
it's like that. But that's the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
That's
to that point, I used to go out every night and just get lost on purpose, because that's how you find those kind of places, that little hole in the wall restaurant that's really, really good, or a bookstore. I mean, that's how we found as big a name as the Shakespeare bookstore is.
Yeah.
We just bumped into it and saw the line going out of it and said, wow, this must be.
What is this place?
In fact, I tried to convince KJ that William Shakespeare was actually inside signing autographs. And that's why there was a line.
It's like, I was baffled. I'm like, why is there this huge line? I had no idea. And then I Googled it and I'm like, oh, this is a really famous place.
Yeah, well, that's a relatively new phenomenon. Thanks to George Whitman's daughter, Sylvia, who took it over from him when she was 22 years old. And she brought a whole new life to the place.
Yeah.
And she's done an amazing, amazing job with it. Yeah, but it's probably one of the #1 tourist destinations for Americans.
Sure, and the fact that it's across the Seine from Notre Dame makes it, you can hit two places pretty much at one time.
Well, yeah, there's plenty to see in that immediate vicinity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, see the oldest tree next door at Saint-Julien-le-Pauvre, for example.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. We
Yeah.
actually, the month we were in Paris, we lived in the Latin Quarter, which is right there,
Right.
and we loved it. Everything that you
Mhm.
need is so close to you there.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
area. Uh-huh.
Well, I think you've answered pretty much all the questions that I have. Kay, do you have anything that we might have missed?
Well, I think that one of the questions, which I don't know if you asked this or if this is one of those rabbit hole questions, I'm not sure, but I'm curious, and I think other people may be curious too. In the US, and I know that you're not a real estate agent or even like a broker, but you're considered, the facilitator. I
Well, I'm
forget
not
the
an
word that.
agent in the States, but we are a licensed agency here.
So my question is, and I think other people would be curious about this too, because I think sometimes people think Adrian Leeds and the person who is the call it guru of knowing the real estate of Paris and Nice and other areas throughout France. How do you make your fee? Like in the US, agents make it through the sale of property or through renting properties, but I think you mentioned that that's not the way that you make your fee, or
Now,
or
we,
it
we
is.
charge, we charge for our services,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a small percentage. But when we have the ability to share the commission with the selling agency, which is not always true, and it's never in Paris, but outside of Paris, we can very often share the agency commission. We actually refund that back to our client. So when that happens, they have that benefit, and it ends up costing them very, very little for us to do all the work as a
Mm-hmm.
result.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to take that commission, I would consider it a conflict of interests.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that's a fair way to work.
Right.
And that's really important to me, that we do things that are as fair as possible and that our clients can absolutely trust us 100%.
Mm-hmm.
We're full disclosure. When you're looking at property, a person who represents it for sale is just not going to tell you certain things that would maybe hinder your desire to
Yes.
buy that property.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Absolutely.
exactly the opposite of what we do. What
Mm-hmm.
we do is point out the positives and the negatives so
Mm-hmm.
that a person can make a decision with their eyes wide open
Mm-hmm.
completely. And that's just it's like insurance. It's
Yeah.
somebody watching your back and making sure
Right.
that you're not going to spend a lot of money unwisely.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Great. Um, the last question, unless Tony, you have another one. You do? Okay. Then never mind. This is not the last question.
You go.
Hey, we could be here all day.
Well, I know you don't have all day, so,
Well,
or
no,
we
I
would
don't
keep you
have all
here
day.
much longer.
No,
Well,
but I
I
have a
was
little bit more time.
okay, good. So, really, the question that I was going to ask is just asking you if there's any question we haven't asked that you think is important for viewers to know who are in a similar situation, seeking to move from the US to France, and what they need to know.
Well, that's definitely a rabbit hole, okay? Because everybody's got, different needs and different questions
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. And we could be here for many days
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and not answer all the questions. That would be for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I will tell you though that I have certain philosophies that I have that I live by, that I try to teach my clients.
Mm-hmm.
To first of all, the hardest thing we have to deal with is expectations, people's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you have to remove expectations from your vocabulary and from your mind. You should never have expectations, but only hopes. If you have hopes and not expectations, then you will never be disappointed. So you just have to understand that things are what they are. There's not necessarily a judgment to them. They just exist. And then you have to deal with whatever that is. Okay. But
Mhm.
if you go in with, well, I expected France to be this, or I expected my neighbors to do that, or I expect, I expected this property to, perform in this way, you're doomed. So
Mhm.
that's an important thing. Okay.
Mhm.
The other thing that I think is insanely important is how to remove fear from your life, because fear is very debilitating.
Mhm.
And fear is something we conjure up in our brains of what we think might happen in the future, but actually never does, because it's
Mhm.
only in our brain, period. Nowhere else does it ever exist.
Mhm.
And so I'm a student of Eckhart Tolle's philosophy, The Power of Now and Living in the Present Moment.
Mhm.
And if you can live in the moment, and if you can remove fear from your, just the minute you start to think, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And you just put that on the shelf and say, forget it. Okay. Because
Mhm.
it hasn't happened. It's only these stupid thoughts that are whirling around in my head.
Yeah.
Then you can really you can make this move happen successfully. You can take it in as an
Yeah.
adventure. You take it as it comes, you deal with it as it comes, you make the best decisions along the way, and whatever happens, happens, and you'll have a great life.
Mhm.
I think
So
the
that's
Yeah.
kind of
adventure,
like,
That's great advice.
that's
Really
what I
great
think
advice.
everybody needs to do.
the adventure aspect of it, I think, is very important.
Yeah.
It's just um, my experience was that every day I saw something I didn't expect to see, and every single time it was better than I could have hoped for. So that's how, if your outlook is of an adventure and you don't have fear, I think you have a much better chance of really getting the most out of where you are.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And it's of
Mhm.
no value. The fear is absolutely of no value. And when someone starts to argue with me about, yes, but it prevents you from, like falling off the cliff. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
come on. We all know you
Mhm.
fall off the cliff, you die.
Right.
You put your finger in a flame, you're going to get burned. You know that. That's not a fear. You have
Mhm.
knowledge of that, so you don't
Mhm.
do it.
Right.
You know, but what we generally have fear of is the unknown. And it's always in our heads. It doesn't
Mhm.
actually exist. It's not
Yeah.
real.
Right.
Mhm.
I watched this through COVID. Oh my God.
Mhm.
I watched
Mhm.
this, the fear in people's minds of, oh my God, we can't go into that crowded room because there's probably 10 people who have COVID and blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
they're just, if you don't want to put yourself in that position, then you just don't do it.
Right.
But there's no
Exactly.
reason to be scared of it.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's
Yeah.
that's
I,
basic philosophy, is go read The Power of Now and
Mhm.
take it in.
It changed my life, that book.
Mine too.
Absolutely changed my life. Mhm.
That's right.
I
Completely.
do have one final question that kind of uh, I haven't heard anybody ask you in seeing other interviews of yours. What you mentioned going to the beach for a couple hours. What do you do? What do you do for fun? How do you relax? How do you enjoy yourself other than work? I mean, it's easy to say you love your work.
Yeah.
That hopefully everybody's been in jobs that they love, although in this country I don't think that's true. But what do you do to relax? What do you do for fun?
Oh gosh, lots of things. Well, the beach is certainly one of my favorite things to do. I'm really a lizard. I can lay there and look at the water all day long, very, very happily. And I just did that for 7 days in Corsica, and it was absolutely fabulous. No, I have to admit, I pretty much work most of my life. However,
Mhm.
the word work doesn't really fit, because I write 3 newsletters a week. So that's many, many hours of writing.
Mhm.
But it's not work for me.
Mhm.
It's really a pleasure. It's really a pleasure to express myself, to learn the things I need to learn, the research that I do in order to write about it. So it's kind of, work, but not
Mhm.
really. And if I weren't doing that, I'd be writing something else. One
Mhm.
of these days, I'm going to write my books. I've got a lot of books to write.
Mhm.
One of these days, I'll go away and do that. Otherwise, dining out,
Mhm.
of course, with friends and all of that,
Mhm.
and exploring,
Yeah.
travel, travel,
Yeah.
travel,
Travel.
travel,
Well,
travel, travel.
Yeah.
as you said, from Paris you can get to anywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah,
At
and
easy,
from
very
these too.
yes,
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely. So whether it's by train or flight, both are inexpensive, relatively speaking.
Mhm.
You
So,
see, for instance, I've had lots of people lately. Bordeaux is like a hot spot. Okay, so I've
We've
had lots
heard that from a lot of our viewers.
they're Bordeaux is for them a hot spot. I don't really understand the appeal to Bordeaux myself because, I mean, it's a pretty city. It's expensive, but it's a very closed city because of the wine industry. If you're not part of the wine industry, it's really hard to break in. But you've got 2-hour TGV access to Paris. But from Bordeaux, you would have to do that or fly before going anywhere else. You're sort of trapped.
Yeah.
And what's around Bordeaux, I mean, Bordeaux is only bordered by close to Spain. If you're in Nice and you have an international airport, you have a lot more access. You're bordered by Italy, and on the eastern side of France is also Switzerland and Germany. And so you have a lot more open to you, and of course the islands like Sardinia and Corsica and all of that. And so I think it's just a lot easier and more interesting than being
now in the summertime, you can fly direct to the United States from Nice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of flights. The flight from Nice to Atlanta, for example, is wonderful.
We were on it. We were on it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm not sure I would want to go hold myself up in Bordeaux. And, one of the other cities, for example, that I like is Lille. And Lille is a quarter of the price of Paris. So it's a really inexpensive place to live. Now, the weather in Lille is cold and wet. It's very much like Belgium. It's on the Belgian border, right? But what's great about Lille is that you have TGV access to Paris, Brussels, London, and Amsterdam. So you can actually then take a TGV, go direct to any of those airports, and then fly out to anywhere in the world from any of those airports. And to Brussels is like 30 minutes on the TGV. You can go to Brussels for the day and come home. You can go to Paris for the day and come home.
Is Lille what most people refer to as Lyon?
No. Lille is Lille, Lyon is Lyon.
Oh, I thought maybe I was saying it wrong.
Lille is in the north, right on the Belgian border.
Oh, okay.
And the culture there is very Belge Flemish, really, but it has a very big Anglophone community because there are a lot of British there, and there's a lot of universities, so it's young, and it's an interesting place for all those reasons because of
Oh yeah, I think you did a House Hunters International there with with a couple that was moving. He was going to university in Lille.
He was
teaching,
that's right. Remember correctly.
Well, he had a thesis situation.
Yes.
And I really didn't know Lille at all before that. I discovered it. And the people that I met and the clients I have there, I have a few clients there, they all said that same thing, that it's the access, that it's a great place. You don't need a car, but the access to get anywhere is amazing because of the TGV. And that's why I'm talking about, this immediate transportation access, how important that is. If what you want to do is
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we are about out of time. Tony, did you have anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I just thank you very much for your time and your expertise. Our viewers are going to be so happy to hear you and hear your answers. I think we hit pretty much everything that we wanted to talk about, and we appreciate how busy you are and the time you gave us today.
Absolutely.
The pleasure is all mine. Okay. And I hope we see you. I know we're going to see you again because you're going to speak at Après-Midi, my afternoon coffee gathering in Paris, right?
Yes, right. October 11th. We're so excited.
That's right before my birthday, so it's a special month for me.
It is.
And that's really exciting. So we have to tell all your readers and viewers to come to Après-Midi from 3 to 5 p.m. at Café de la Mairie in Paris, and it's going to be a good time.
It will be a good time.
When's your birthday?
A few days later.
My mom's is the 14th and my dad's is the 29th. 14th. Your birthday is the 14th? Oh my gosh.
Your mother.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. So,
But different years, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah,
Although I
quite a
might
few.
be
No,
the
no,
same
no, no.
girl. No.
No, no. Yeah, many. My
Great.
mom's going to be 88 this year.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Hmm.
So only a little
Yeah.
bit off.
And my dad will be 86. She's the older woman. So, yeah.
Okay, so we share the same birthday. That's lovely.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. Okay, so merci beaucoup.
Thank
That's
you so
about
much.
as much French as I'm going to venture into saying today, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you again, and we'll be seeing you in October.
Thanks. Bye.
Au
Bye-bye.
revoir. So that's it. That's our video for today. We hope you enjoyed our interview with Adrian Leeds.
And if you have any questions that you thought you were going to hear that you need answers for, please just put them in the comments section. We'll get back with Adrian and we'll answer you that way.
And one other thing that I would like to mention before we end for today is our Patreon membership. As something that you may be interested in being a part of. As a part of that membership, we post videos, we post outtakes, for example, from our interview with Adrian today and other behind the scenes footage that you may be interested in. We want to thank our latest patron, Daniel, for joining our Patreon membership, and also our other members who are Anne, Debbie, Carol, Roxy, and Sharon. Thank you so much for supporting our channel.
Thank you.
A bientôt.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.